And yeah, we're recording, so we can start off. We've got about 50 minutes, and we're gonna try fitting in Philip's demo and the marketplace discussion as well. Yeah, Philip, I think you.
Can you let
I mean,
me share this?
yeah, should be able to now. I think it'll also be nice, Philip, for you to share a few insights, like just broad insights you're gaining from RSM, because I think some of the people on the call may not have as much access to it.
Okay. Basically, everything I'm about to show you here has no holochain at all. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that I wanted to build a tool that I could use, that other people could use in smaller groups, that allowed us to build things together and then attach holochain to the end. Because I'm really going down this line of agent-centric means that I don't need anybody. Right? Means that I should be able to operate fully operational, no connection to anybody. It's only at the point where I want to share data that anything that I have done needs any kind of rules or connection, right? So essentially, as an agent-centric developer, I can do whatever the hell I want, and nobody else has any influence on that. But when I want to share things, that's when we have, rules between the people that we're sharing and reputation and that sort of thing. So, and when I started this, I had this idea, and basically I rebuilt this whole thing in like 6 days because I'm not allowed out of the house, so there's nothing else to do. So I'll just shut this. So we have a project here called CRISPR that I'm working on, and little Kanban columns here. So this is essentially a Kanban management tool. So you've got all your items here. So I'm actually using this to build what I'm building. So let's say we want to do a new item, and we'll call this, what's this group called? Do we have a call? Hackalong. And we could say in here,
What's the editor you're using there, out of interest?
Sorry?
What's the text editor you're using there, out of interest?
It's called TipTap. It's a version, or it's an implementation of the Prose Mirror editor, which is also written by the Code Mirror crew. So it's pretty cool. So add some checklist items. Let's say, then demo features. That'll do. And let's tag this demo and feature. And I'll assign this to myself. Right, so done. So now my item shows up down the bottom here, as you'd expect, and we're doing it. So let's dump it in here. Right. So in this condensed mode, this is for scheduling, like moving things around. You can then expand them a little bit as well. And this gives you the text that you wrote and the and your checklist, so you can modify your checklist here if you will. So I've done that. And you get a nice little bar, everything. If you want to edit these things, you can just hit the button here and go back and edit them. There's also a chat system. So you can see this one here has got just like a single chat. So there's no actual messages. But this one has one, and is there one with more? No, I've already done that one. All right. Yeah, so this is a timeline system. So I haven't actually finished this yet, but you can type your messages in here, and the idea is it's a lightweight way of discussing the item. And you can put emojis on these things as well. So like that. Switch back to the thing as well. And close that off. So that's the basic functionality of that. Now, quite often when you look at a Kanban board, you don't particularly know which things you should be working on or where things are, and things could be anywhere. So let's have a tag cloud, shall we? So this is all the tags in the Kanban, and you can go, what was I supposed to be working on? Oh, that's right, the demo. Right, here we go. Right, so there's me, Hackalong demo, my face on it. Same sort of thing, you can do that there. Now, what you often find in a Kanban board too, is I'm sure you've seen this 100 times, is that this board goes through and let's have a look at this one here. So you've got all this cool information about it, right? It's like, you know, this good detailed information about what this thing is supposed to do, this particular feature. It's got steps on how to complete it. Actually, let's change the order of those. All right, put that in that order. And this is all the information. Now, if you look at some of these, the way I've written them, like this one, I don't particularly like that. I was going to change it. Let's do this one. So these are like test steps, right, for an end-to-end test. So for this particular feature, I should be able to, summary card should show a list of assignees, right? So that's a test. Remove an assignee, right? That's a test. Detailed, right? That's a test. So what I'm going to do next, and that's, I'll just, one of these, here we go, automated test card. What you're going to be able to do is click the code icon on these tests, on these test steps, and add some Cypress code. Now, as opposed to things like Cucumber, or you know, all the other ways you have of writing automated tests, is that they're quite, in their effort to be flexible, they're a real pain in the ass. Because if you've ever done any Cucumber, you know, like, you know, given this, when this, then this, I mean, that just drives you bonkers after you've written 3 tests, right? And it doesn't make sense. You can't give that to a user or to a person who's using it, because they're called players. I'm trying not to call them users anymore. And they'll just go, this is stupid. No, and no one wants to read it, right? Plus, then you have to do every single step. So every single step has to do stuff. Well, what if I've got things in here that aren't actual steps? What if it's just you know, did you do this, or, you know, some other thing that doesn't need a test step on it? So by doing it this way, I can now put Cypress code on steps that I want to automate, and then automate them. The other thing is, so that's one thing. And so now I get to reuse all of that information and can actually write good automated tests on it. The other thing is that things like, say, this one, card reactions. This is a feature I want to be able to do. Card reaction conveyor. So I can put, you know, put a card reaction in here. So, you know, this is cool. Right. Now, this is suitable for a knowledge base. So what I can do is hit this button here. Just go to the knowledge tree. Boom. Do you want to convert this to an article? Yes, I do. Right. So now it's gone from my Kanban because it's finished, it's been done, it's been tested, all that kind of cool stuff. Still using all that cool information in there. I can go into my knowledge base, which is going to have a tag cloud as well. And these are all the other ones that I've already completed. So I can look at like Kanban tag cloud. And at the moment, this is the same form as the editing form, but I'm going to change the formatting so that it's like a knowledge base kind of setup, and you won't be able to change, you can't change whether things are done and that sort of stuff. And there won't be assignees on it, but you'll still have the tags. So now we've got this basically a complete system that I would like to use to build things. So I can go from, basically what I do is I write myself an idea, like this one here, syncing with Holochain. This was an idea I came up with yesterday. So I just wrote down the idea, and then as I put more and more, as I start to work on it, I'll put checklist items in there that I'll write in such a way that can be used as tests. And I write the card in such a way that it can be used as a knowledge base article later. And this all runs off, I'm using the vuex state model. So I can just save that, and that just saves the state file and reloads it when I want. So the next part is extracting the data model out of the state, because what I found was, and I'm sure everybody who's done this, being developers, we always have this idea that we should start with the data model because that's the most important thing, right? Well, it's not, as far as I'm concerned. The data model should be the absolute last thing done. Because what I'm allowing us to do, if you have a look at this card, entry detail card, you'll be able to edit this form and add in new fields. So this will actually open up a code editor. I'm building a component library, so you can cut and paste components into the code. So if I want to add in a new field, like some other text field or something like that, I can just drop it in there. And when I save it, the state automatically gets this new field. I don't have to write anything about, I don't have to go and change data models or anything like that, right? It just literally, because it's JavaScript, it just adds on a new field. Done. And that's saved into the state. So then that allows me to, I've literally gotten out of my own way building this, because I don't have to stuff around with data models and holochain and all this kind of stuff. I can literally just build exactly what I want. It all saves, it all does everything. It's all linked, all that kind of stuff. And then when I'm feeling like it's ready to go, like I'm pretty close to feeling it's ready to go, I will be able to generate the holochain data model and generate the DNA from that. Which means that in 3 days' time, when I want to add a new field, right, I can do the same thing again. I can just regenerate it, create a new DNA, publish the DNA. So this whole CRISPR thing I'm building is going to be to build holo-hosted apps as a priority. So you get this, so what happens is, so if you read things like linting before saving, right? So one of the problems of developing code with the thing that you're coding with is if you crash it, you can't fix that, right? So what I'm running is there's a mirror of CRISPR running. And then when I do the linting, it runs the linting on there. And I do the testing, it runs the testing on there. And that actual mirror is the one that gets deployed. So when I start building new apps, like I'm going to do like a social media highlight kind of thing next, I'll have a separately running app from CRISPR for my social media app. When I make changes to the code gets linted on that second one. And if it passes, then I'll change the code on this one. And then all the tests are on that. So I can run the tests like asynchronously. I just hit the test button and go away and keep working. And the tests will run on the other app and then report back. Which also means that I've now always got a ready to deploy package that's all running and tested, ready to go. And I can just punch that out whenever I feel like it. Because to get your apps hosted on Holo, on the App Store, you're going to have to be reviewed. And having done this for 2 other companies in my history, I know that for the company doing it is an absolute pain in the ass, because it's a lot of work for little return. And quite often, quite a few developers are quite precious about the way they do things, right? And then when you tell them that that's not good enough, they get all upset and then they'll just leave the community. I've seen it happen hundreds of times. So what I'm doing here is I want to give people a way to produce a holo-hosted app that has passed all the things that need to be done, so that when it comes to the engineers at Holo to review it, they can literally go, yeah, I can see all the tests are run. I can see it's got this, and this. It's got all the help with it. It's got everything it needs. Right, let's host it. Give some, clock up some reputation 2 or 3 times. Clock up some reputation. Clock up some reputation. Oh, cool. Here's another app from Sid. Boom, gone. Don't even need to worry about it.
That's really cool.
Thank you. Done.
Real quick though, and we can also spend a couple minutes on questions from others, but my question is, I can also obviously invite people to join my DH, like if I want a shared space with them, or if they want a shared space with me, they can invite me, and all of that is also
yeah, so that's
right?
what the list of people here is. So what you'll have is a list of people for all of your projects.
Mm.
Right? Excuse me. And then this form's a bit ugly, so excuse it, but you'll get the idea.
Mm.
Then what you'll have is a way to edit your project. And you can see here, this is the team. So out of that long list of people, I've chosen this list of people to be the team for this project.
Mm.
And these are the people that get selected for out of that list for each of the cards.
How would that integrate with so technically we don't even need to go through the App Store for simple operations like this, right? If we're just sharing a DH. No, since you brought up the App Store, I'm thinking about that as an obstacle to just spin out our DHTs. And I guess that's not the obstacle in just simple operations. Right?
No, if you and I are working on something together, we can just connect by a whole line. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. A couple minutes on any other questions people might have, or we can move on to marketplaces.
I'm just trying to understand the concept of what you're talking about, Philip. So are you saying that you'll be able to use this interface to create apps, or like to sort of like organize with other people on what the app should do?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple of different features here. So the Kanban, this is like what it's going to do.
But this is just an example, isn't it? The app could be anything, and this is an example.
No, this is me building CRISPR with CRISPR. So these are all features of CRISPR that I'm about to build. These are ones that are done and waiting for review by Arthur. And these are the ones that have been done and reviewed and are now in the knowledge base. So these are actual features, all these work. Right? So you can go and look at card reactions, right? So if we go and look at card reactions, I'll find a card, so this one here. I'll put some smiley faces on it because you all love my demo. Right. So these features will work. And then what's going to happen is that this little cool button here, this is the one that's going to generate the holochain stuff. So next phase is to click this. This will bring up remember the SVG thing I had with all the different entry types on it? This will extract the data model from that and show you what that is. So you will have like the entry types. So you can see with the entry types here, I've got project, Kanban, columns, cards, and inside a card, there is checklist, tags, assignees, your reactions and all that kind of stuff. So that's the data model. And then, so very soon, so probably tomorrow, you'll be able to see the actual data model, which is a lot simpler. I haven't gone down the route that I was before of each individual entry type has its own DHT, because as much fun as that was, it gets too unwieldy pretty quickly. And we were doing that because we didn't want to be changing DNAs in the wild. Whereas now I don't care. I'm working with the idea that I'll be changing DNAs all the time. So there's no, so people will get, an update. So, right, because the big problem with putting things in the wild that you don't want to change is that then they become scary to change. And the problem with software at the moment is that somebody makes a guess, spends 6 months worth of work building something that they guessed would work. They put it out in the wild. Did it work? No. Right. So there's 6 months of failure. Whereas if you spent 2 days building a feature, put it out in the wild, it doesn't work, and you come back, that's not no skin off your nose, right? So I want these apps to be, so you can experiment. I call it hypothesis-driven design. So you have this idea, you put something out in the wild, did it work? Because I measured it. Yes, it did. Yeah, cool, keep it. I measured it, went down, cool, pull it out. So the data model is way easier.
Yeah.
Do you have clarity yet on what the what the robustness of that looks like over updates between DNAs and things yet? Like, is there ways, once you've got a network connected and you're replicating data with others, is there ways to kind of migrate between DNA
So you're going to
versions?
love this. In the RSM or the new version, RSM, applications are made up of multiple DNAs. So this is a single DNA app at the moment, but I'm about to add in, like a community kind of stuff, posts and comments and that kind of thing. So that'll be a separate DNA. Plus I'm also building a chat, which will be a third DNA. When you install that, right, they go in as one application. They have one application ID. And then an application has multiple DNAs. And when you do that, then you have one agent key across all of them, which means you don't have to do bridging and all that kind of rubbish, right? Because because that was all installed under the same agent key. As far as Holochain's concerned, it's the same app, and you can call across those DNAs really easy.
Does that mean warrants get automatically propagated in that set of DNAs as well?
I haven't checked about warrants, but I would imagine so, yeah.
I don't think so. And and on our session yesterday, it also seemed like that's not really been thought through yet. Or as they're calling it, validation receipts now, not warrants. But yeah, specifically, what does that mean? Like, what is the change within Holochain though that allows for these bundles to be created more easily? App bundles as well.
I'm not sure at that level, but I just know that that's how you do it.
Cool.
So I'm actually building a conductor admin tool as well at the moment.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Philip.
All right.
Thanks for sharing, and yeah, hope to keep watching as this progresses. Should we move on to marketplaces? I think there's a couple of people who are really excited about it. Possibly, do you want to lay the ground for the conversation?
Yeah, okay. I think this, so did you share that neighborhoods modules Lumio thread? I remember you saying you were going to, but I'll type it in the chat anyway.
Yeah, popped into the invite, but yeah, we should do it here as well.
Like it's probably not it's a wall of text, but it's kind of worth a skim later just to get a sense of some of the things that we're thinking through. And I owe that thread a reply, so there'll be more words in there probably an hour after this call. Yeah, I think I'm riffing more on the original demo of Chimera and Scepter that Philip did some months ago than that current one. And we've mainly been talking about how, well, I guess I should start by trying to clarify something about what we're talking about with neighborhoods, right? Which is an ongoing process of articulation. So we're kind of working towards this idea of a highly modular architecture where a community, the way that Sid concretized it was to say that the current operating paradigm of the internet is to have specific apps that impose generic culture on people. So like Facebook being a good example, it's this one app that we all use and it has its own kind of pretty limited, nasty corporate culture that everyone has to abide by. So we think that there's this new paradigm that things are moving to where we're going towards generic tech tools and specific culture. So you have these highly modular, very general utility things, but then you've got this little collective or organization or company of people that do things in a certain way. So they take those tools and assemble them in a particular way that gives them specifically what they need rather than having to make some compromise and use the things that everybody else uses. So that's a bit of background there. And at a technical level, I think it comes down to sort of three things. And the first one is that assemblage, like the community then kind of has this default palette of like you first join the collective and these are the interfaces and tools that you're presented with. Like maybe we use a wiki as our landing page and that's kind of where we organize from and the work starts to ripple out from there and you navigate. Or maybe we start with a chat app, and that's kind of where everyone centers around and people do things off there. Or maybe it's more like a blog and a storytelling kind of frame that people land in, or maybe there's several. And in the, for places where it's kind of a permission space of trusted people, that seems like the kind of obvious way that people might organize. But then you also have these public spaces that are more impersonal, where people might just want to come into a network to do some trading. And so there's no real identity in that, or sense of community or place to go and talk to people. You just land in a marketplace and you see all the listings and you can make some economic interactions there. So there's kind of some differences as to how you might land in a community and where you might engage from, that we can talk about in terms of how you assemble things. But beyond that, there's also this need, we think, that not everybody in the community should have to do things exactly the same way. Because if that's the way you organize, then really you have this hierarchical organizing in your group, because in order to make a change to the software that everybody's using, you'll have to come to agreement, and then management has to ask the developers to build it and write the code. And so that's kind of the cycle where we all update things. But we want people to be able to come in and land with the default set of tools and then say, actually, like, I don't really like the way this is set up, and there's some additional nuance and reputational context maybe that I want to see about people that's not standard for this group that everyone else is seeing, but I want to be able to import that functionality and see it within the apps that everybody else is using. And that's pretty interesting, because there's two pieces to that. There's like the DNA modules as the modular backend pieces that hold the data. And so, you're in this collective and they're using this set of modules, and then now you're kind of going, well, I want to pick this one from somewhere else and bring it in and make it part of the mix as well. And of course, that doesn't really have any meaning unless it bubbles up into the user interface and you actually see it. So that's been the conversation with us lately, is like, how do we customize the UI in that way, and what does it look like for the end user? And some good examples we've been talking through in the context of some of the projects around, like, so there's the Shiro trading marketplace for food and things that Victor's been working on, I think. And you might want to just jump into that place and trade with people and not think more about it, but you may also want to prioritize trades with certain kinds of folks dependent on your ideological relationship with theirs. And so you might want to pull in data from, say, a platform like SeedShare, where they're doing all this seed banking and seed sharing and tracking who's contributing to biodiversity and stuff. So you could pull in that module from SeedShare and view it in the Shiro marketplace, and then see everybody next to them in the market, a little indicator of how many seeds they've shared, or how often, or like all those decisions are kind of things we want to be left up to people. So there's a few questions there, and in that thread there's some from Sid talking through this. And so it's like, when I'm within one collective, do I see offers stream in just from that collective, or do they come from elsewhere as well? And my answer to that is that you're just kind of looking within that collective if you're in that collective space, and the things you're seeing are all its internal listings and whatever external stuff people are kind of feeding into its network through the DNAs. But then there's also like the consolidated marketplace of offerings and transactions that are across all of the communities that you're a part of, not just that one you're interacting with. And should you be seeing that should you be seeing stuff from community A within community B, or should you be able to see them both together in some other place that's part of neither community? And I think that's the model that makes most sense, because you might have these little individual communities with their own ways of displaying and behaving in markets and displaying listings, but then you might want to kind of step outside of that and think about yourself as an economic agent that can see, maybe you're in 10 different marketplaces in your neighborhood that all trade different things. So you kind of need the specific interfaces within each community, and you also need the generic interface that covers everything. So the way I'm kind of thinking about it, it's like, you've got apps for specific community contexts which encompass many operational details potentially, like within within the seed share community, you're sharing seeds and you're also communicating with people, and you might also be posting to blogs, and you might also be doing shipping and handling stuff to send things around. So those are all different kind of things that you're doing, but it's all in that community. And then you also want to be able to see, well, I've got this specific operational context, and say it's like managing all the commitments I've made to people. Like that's a particular thing I need to do. And it would be nice to be able to do that across encompassing many communities. So being able to manage all my commitments and see that I've made 5 commitments to this community and I've made a few other commitments to this one, and they're kind of in conflict, and I need to manage that and adjust them. I might just pause there for a minute because I feel like I'm talking a lot. Does anyone want to kind of riff on that a bit before we go much deeper?
Thanks. I feel like that was a summary of the last 5 hackalongs. So there's a lot you had to summarize and pack in there. I feel like Lynn will have a bunch of things to say, but I'll just say real quick, like I'm excited by the thought of, as opposed to like one global marketplace where stuff is traded, like each community spinning out its own little bazaar. Like say something like Sacred Capital Issues has its set of investors, right? And so instead of investors having to go to an exchange, like Sacred Capital has its little pool of liquidity for its investors, like inside its community. And so you have to be a member to be able to access that. And so the questions are sitting on, to bring it into more tangible example is, I guess when you're within Sacred Capital, you see these investor offers and trades happening. When you hop to Economicit, you'll see or Holochain, you'll see Holochain offers and trades going on. But you'll also, I guess, have a centralized dashboard where you see trades across all your communities. And so that's kind of how we're thinking about marketplaces. And so think about it more as like distributed communities. And so it's also exciting because let's say I have, a fruit tree in my backyard and I want to offer the fruit from it. I might say to Holochain members, I'm offering it as a gift. To the next community, I'm offering it at 50% discount because I kind of like them. And then if it still doesn't get sold, I'm offering it to the world at large at the market price. And so it lets you, make these contextual offers as well. So almost thinking about it as a bazaar rather than a market. But that's the conversations. Questions or reflections, or Alban, if you have thoughts, or Lynn, if you have thoughts, feel free to jump in.
I would, if that's okay, I could just express a bit what we're trying to build and see how that would relate to what Possibly was just talking about.
Sure, yeah.
And I'll try to be as clear and as quick as possible. So I have some friends, and we got in touch. We found out that there's some people in Norway, in Scandinavia. They're called the Reko rings, REKO rings, and there's all these different local communities, and hundreds of them actually, that producers they actually use Facebook groups to organize. That's the technical level that they're on. So they post whatever and then every sort of town, there's all these different rings, so very small rings, and people post what they have for sale, and then other people make a comment on Facebook. I want the 8 kilos of tomato, and then they kind of reply on these comments, kind of trying to organize their interaction, and then they meet in a particular parking lot to do the exchange and then make the payment. And so all these different rings operate slightly different. They all have their own organizational level, how far location, how big their scope is. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to actually build an application for particularly someone in one of these record rings, but pretty much any community anywhere that wants to serve this goal that they have, to make that process much more efficient. Our intention right now, it's not necessarily to do it decentralized, agent-centric, or any kind of way, just a regular Web 2.0 application, because most of these rings are not really, I don't know how comfortable they are with trying something this new. And then we don't even know how this would actually work to apply something and to actually sacrifice our reputation and then not to be sure that it's working. However, we're kind of choosing, because we're a group of people that some are decentralized, sort of enthusiasts, like I am as well. So we're trying to work it on both approaches at the same time. So whatever we can try to start adapting this application, and then through relationships, maybe we can kind of introduce the other one and just expand. And this, yeah. So I guess this would be as far as the farming app.
So Alban, how far along are you? Is it something we could see at some point, or?
Oh, come on. Not very far. Not very
Okay.
far. We're just,
It's okay.
we're still, so we just built our community. We just moved in the community. So we're in the process of actually building collaboration. And our project is quite ambitious, very ambitious, super ambitious and super radical. So this is just one of the applications that we're building. We're trying to build pretty much Uber-like application, Airbnb-like application, Patreon, Kickstarter, and all these crowdsourcing applications. Pretty much all these applications that are privately owned, we're trying to build them as commons. So this is just one of them, and it's a good opportunity to, the idea is a good opportunity to start to use in this application within a community somewhere, and then just kind of expanding, just introducing other applications as well. For example, the Uber-like application would be very useful. So let's say this record rings uses this application, and one of the issues that they have now, sometimes it's not really so beneficial for them to even sell on these rings, because they have to drive to town to actually make the exchange. So something like a smart, like a Uber application that we call Our Transport, could actually solve that problem very easy by someone else that happens to drive, just kind of doing the delivery for it. So then, as you can see, like these applications will start being much more useful with one another.
That is really cool, because it feels like you have the social fabric, and so then just spinning up these tools is what you need. And I actually think that's the easy part. Like, if you have that existing reputational data, creating the right kind of interactions in a trustworthy, meaningful way is the easy bit, right? Like, then I know I'm getting into a car with someone who isn't a stranger, but look, they've got all of this, context that I can judge them from on the basis of. So yeah, I think those tools could be anything. It could be a marketplace, it could be a ride share, it could be different kinds of supply chain, all on the back of the social fabric that you kind of have.
Another application is a mutual credit application. Mm-hmm. So like if a community is already doing this, they're already generating some sort of local economy, that adaptability of a local currency will become much more feasible, much easier to do. So yeah, just to follow on your thought. But we arrange some tasks, we have some goals, and one of the things is we're trying to do some diagram and actually contact Postsuite to see how HoloREA how we can build this on top of HoloREA, because we'll ask later why, but like I'm kind of curious myself, because as far as I understand HoloREA, I think it will be very, very important for for all of us, I guess, if all this data is actually being created in some sort of ontology, that it can actually be, the sense making could happen later, because the data would already be tagged, I guess. Sorry, I don't want to take the conversation, because this is what I do. Obviously, this is what I do. So,
No, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
I guess I don't have many reflections on that, except for echoing Sid that it sounds like an ideal scenario. Because as you say, you're already trying to sort of decompose all these tech platform monoliths and create little networks between them. So yeah, very interested to hear about, and yeah, maybe do some mapping as to how REA might model it. I'm conscious we only have about 10 minutes-ish left. I guess the two topics that have come up for me around this, one is like, what's, it's just hand waving really from me, but what's some of the technical pieces needed in order to create the kind of UI customization that we're talking about might be. And the other one was Sid's kind of been curious about what it looks like when you start having lots of different networks and you replicate listings out to multiple places, and how we imagine we might handle that down the track, which it sounds like is going to be quite relevant for you as well, Alban. Any preferences?
I'd be curious to dive, like for 10 minutes, dive into the second one, like
Sure.
how REA could help us coordinate those multiple offers and trades across communities.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be anything all that crazy. It's just I might share a couple of things actually. Like this is a pretty old diagram, this architecture one, but it still kind of holds true. This is just looking at what it looks like to replicate listings. I mean, entries more generically than listings. Let's get away from marketplaces for a second. But if you're putting something down in one community, how does it get to others? And so this mechanism here that I'm detailing is mainly about translating the semantic meaning of things across that membrane, because one community's idea of a particular type of resource is probably different to another's. So, back to your crate of tomatoes, Alban, whether it's a crate of tomatoes in one community and that's the only information it has, and another community may have a crate of organic tomatoes and a crate of nitrogen-free tomatoes and a crate of sprayed tomatoes and all that stuff. So there's a mechanism we could build into the back end of Hollow REA that does that transmission and basically takes the original data and changes those taxonomies when it sends them out and replicates data. But there's also a UI level type thing. I'm having such a weird internet time this morning, like in the middle of a video call, and websites keep saying they can't be found. But I'm sure many of you have seen the Harley UI and what it looks like to post to multiple communities. Like they really just have a drop-down box in the post window, where, an autocomplete, sorry, where you start typing the names of things. So if I go to do something here, I'm posting and building Harlow because that's the community I'm in here, but there's all these other ones I'm members of, and so I can kind of cross-post between multiple network spaces within Hilo, even though they're not really network spaces, it's all on the one server, but or one cluster anyway. But these two things are kind of the same thing, like whether you're doing it in the UI and specifying the communities you want to replicate to, and maybe, in some of the functionality we'll build down the track, like Sid was saying, like you might want to send the same offer with some sort of slight differences across multiple communities. So this community gets the gift, and this one gets the you have to pay a little bit, and this one gets the normal price. But yeah, I think it really does become a UI level thing, because that's going to be a different decision for you as a person on the other end, depending on what every individual listing is going to be a different decision. So it does need to kind of bubble all the way up and have some control over where things go that you have agency over when you make it. But either way, you're kind of just left with a mapping of what was the original data and where did all the places that end up, right? And so some of Sid's questions are around like, well, how do you manage filling orders when you sent that order out to multiple networks? And actually, I think, like I was going to say, there's a management thing there, because those network spaces are not actually going to be talking to each other. It's just that you talk to all of them yourself. So if the listing gets matched here and sold, then you kind of are responsible for going and telling the other networks that it got sold, or else they don't know and you might get the same offer met twice. I think with holochain capability tokens, there's a way you could do that automatically. Like if you get an offer for a listing from one network, it's going to come into your network because they'll be sending something into your network space, and because of these mappings that you've created, you'll have something in their network that tells it the origin network, so they'll be then kind of pinging back. But yeah,
shouldn't there be one central ledger, or maybe it's just your personal ledger of what you have to offer, and all intents and offers flow out from that, and before closing or confirming a trade, they actually check with that central ledger, right? Wouldn't that be a way to design?
I would hesitate to design it that way, because it means that like everyone in a marketplace needs to kind of go and do full source chain queries in different DNAs for people to get that information. You know what I mean? Maybe it works, but I don't know. That seems kind of weird. I think it's mostly a case of replicating data through and having those associations set up so that the external marketplace, when an offer gets matched there and someone sends a commitment to say that or an intent to say that they want to trade, that's going to be listed both on the marketplace and in whichever originating network you made the listing originally, because of the flow forward, the flow back is the same. So it just kind of has to be replicated again, I think, is the answer.
So before, let's say I place an order in community A and then go on and place the same order in B, C, and D. If someone wants to confirm the trade in D, they actually come back to check with community A before confirming it?
No, they just so this is with REA there's a few stages, and the first one being an intent. So they send you an intent to make it happen, and if you want to accept that, you would send a commitment. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, but there might be some validation logic that we haven't implemented yet around commitments and intents like that. So no, I don't think there is there? Like there's no like you can only fulfill you can only commit to an intent once. People could commit it all over the place and overcommit and do all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
But that could lead to phishing, right? Like I could just be like, I'm just gonna send a bunch of intents just to see what I get, just to test the market. And that's, again, this was a problem we were trying to solve as traders, like sending out orders across exchanges. And then you would also have people just gaming just to see like how much of demand there really is. Like I don't actually want to, and if there's a lot of demand, like I actually push up my price, and you see people doing that as well. Or maybe if you do have an intent, and if it is actually available, you haven't traded, then it gets executed without your confirmation. I guess it's possible to design it that way.
Yeah, we haven't really had a conversation yet about, whether we think that the kind of white label marketplaces we offer are going to be more manual intervention, human driven, like, yes, okay, I've received this request, I'm going to make the confirmation myself. Or whether we want to do some automatic algorithmic stuff, which sounds more difficult.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, if we avoid the manual intervention, then all it's checking is that trade still alive? If it is, then just confirm it and close it, and that prevents some of the gaming. But in any case, I think that would be fun to figure out, because I think that's always been the problem with distributed exchanges. In fact, I would say that's one of the reasons why even in traditional in proper finance, you've seen a consolidation of exchanges. Like you pretty much have just one big exchange in every country, because that problem of multiple exchanges wasn't solved, which is why like now you just have big exchanges and dominating the entire country. So to
Maybe the
solve
way to do it.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Continue.
No, I just said that's like it would be fun to figure that out because I think that's very central to distributed exchanges.
I'm wondering if maybe a half decent solution could be more along the visibility lines than the automation lines. Like, and I do, the person who originally made the trade request, they need to be always online for it to work this way. But I think with HoloHost, that's a possibility anyway. But you want like someone from Marketplace D sends an intent that they're interested. And so you have a capability token that talks to your DNA to say that, so that they can say, I was interested. And in doing that, it triggers logic in your DNA that goes and updates marketplaces A, B, and C to say, this is under a contract or whatever the proper terminology is.
Yeah.
That seems achievable.
Yeah, but I think it might need like each user to have some kind of marketplace widget installed, which does that coordination.
It may do, in order to
facilitate. Yeah, something of that sort. Or it might be easier to do it that way. I think you can always do it without any widget really, but yeah. Anyway, I think after this call, it might be fun to figure that out.
What about if sorry, Busby. So what about if a user is doing multiple intents on the same resource across different marketplaces? It's just flagged on their account that this is their behavior, and so anyone that anyone that is doing that behavior is visible to anyone else on all the other marketplaces. So it's not, because I can see a case where there might be cases where marketplaces actually don't want to be so rigid in their behavior. But they still want to have a way of saying, we don't want this behavior, but we don't want to stop it completely, because there might be valid reasons why people are doing it.
Yeah, which is why, like, I think like close integration with the reputation vault would be nice, because then you also know, and that's usually what brokers also end up playing that role of, right? Like, don't bother with this person. They just, they're just fishing for prices. Or brokers also tend to have a sense of, no, this person's really serious, so you can actually offer prices for them. But sorry, you were saying something possible.
I think there's also a partial solution in the use of reputation with that as well. Like, there's a lot of filtering you can do on someone's behavior in a marketplace based on your knowledge of them from other contexts. And it kind of touches on the other part of this, the UI conversation, but I think there's a similar thing going on there that app developers are going to have to facilitate for, and we saw a lot of it with Philip's early demos of CRISPR and Chimera, when it was like he had these view slots that you could kind of put any arbitrary components in next to a user and things. So it kind of feels like you need like a similar configuration module, so that, there might be some defaults in community that these are the UI widgets that you see next to a user's profile. And it's, I'm hand waving, but it's kind of like, I see it as a data and context kind of binding. Like, so for this data type of a person, in this context of, a small little badge that goes at, underneath something, then what extra modules and data and things might I want to draw into there to display? And, for a person in this other context of like a full page profile, what other stuff do I want to draw down in there? Or, do we then say, okay, the data is actually the person's profile and their, like, their holochain network details or their address details, and that's a slot that you can customize. Like, I don't know yet. And I suppose it's one of those things that's best answered by doing it and implementing. Like, as we start building marketplaces and seeing what the UI is like. I mean, we were talking just last week about how every marketplace tends to look the same. So I think it's easy to see there's a lot of space for having that kind of general purpose way of seeing things. But it's always, that kind of classification is always a very nuanced thing that takes a long time, I find. Like there's always lots of edge cases, and like, oh, you know, we thought that small was a good idea for the context of this person badge, but actually now we have a small and a smaller and a small est, and it's losing its meaning. And you know, there's interesting ways that things evolve like that. I'm not quite sure what the right semantics for it are yet.
Yeah, that would be good to flesh out.
Yeah, that's all.
I think you're frozen, possibly, but I think you're back now. Yeah, I think that's all from my side. Unless Lynn, do you have any thoughts?
No, not really. There's not any short ones for sure. And I mean, I do feel like there's such a broad range of use cases for some, you know, for marketplace, for like exchange, you know. And when you started talking about derivatives trading, I'm sort of like, whoa, you know.
Whoa, in the sense,
that one had not occurred to me, right?
In what way? What do you mean? Like, why are we
you know,
comparing
like, you
the
know,
two? Like, why are we bringing big bad finance into this?
No. Well, just because the thought process there is so different. And, you know, from say some like mutual credit community of people that mostly know each other.
Yeah.
Or a buying club.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. It's not nearly as driven by efficiency of price.
Right. And I feel like there's, at some point we need to, well, I mean, I think we should start out with use cases for people who we're working with, who are doing it right, you know, Kamal and whoever. And work from there, and then kind of try to see what are the samenesses and what are the differences between all this stuff on the user experience side.
I think
I'll probably do a bunch of those issues trying to cross marketplaces too.
On that note, I'll just quickly add, like, which is why I think like creating those membranes around marketplaces would be super important, because if not, like, you might have a well-intentioned community like Kamal's or Victor's or Alban's creating these marketplaces, but then you just have global capital swooping in and just in the interest of arbitrage, like figuring out, okay, I'm getting tomatoes here in Kamal's farm, but it's this price outside, and I'm just gonna game and assault Kamal's 50 people exchange because I'm getting, like, there's an algorithm that's extracting the profits, right? And which is why I think those membranes or doing marketplaces with, you know, within those communities is super important. Otherwise, it's just victim to the dynamics of global capital, I feel. Because even today, like with algos, you don't need a lot of money to attract global capital, right? Like, even if I'm making a couple $100 in trades, I'll direct my algos towards any decentralized exchange. Like, it's not like there's actually human capital doing it. So, which is, yeah, that's just what I'm got. Like, I'm actually reiterating what you're saying. Like, we have to build those protection mechanisms to get this going. Sorry, Sam, you were saying something.
I was going to say two things just quickly. So Alban's point that the not wanting to test out, you know, new technology early on is important. So I don't know if how you're going with that white labeled site, but I guess that would be an important thing to be able to show people that we can have a working system that kind of works how you would expect, say, how the current, Facebook groups or whatever system works, but it's also got the capabilities of being modified how you want it to be modified. So that might take away some people's reluctance to sort of jump into this space. The other point was towards what Lynn was saying about the derivatives trading, is maybe we need someone sort of like from a hacker's point of view, but like a financial hacker. So if I was a trader, how could I use this system to benefit myself and that kind of thing? So almost like penetration testing from a
I think any crypto pro would do.
Yeah, we've probably got a lot of those people on board already. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing with commerce, right? Like, it is so easy to attract attention, any kind of it. Like, so, which is why just leaving it open, I think just leaves it, exposes it to some of those issues as well.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was also thinking about what I mentioned last week about the social worker element of it. So as a user is using these systems, there needs to be a way for their data to be, or their interactions to be accessible to a third party that maybe can support what they're doing. So if they've done a certain number of interactions in this system or in this marketplace, then a third party, I'm thinking social worker, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a social worker, can then be used to sort of, for someone to realize, oh, this is the kind of interactions you do. Then there are all these other marketplaces out there that could help you in other ways that you don't even know about. So an example I think of in my area, northern Melbourne, is that there are a bunch of Indigenous groups, and if I want to contact one of the Indigenous groups, I've got no idea what each of them does. So there could potentially be a social worker that can help me reach out and say, oh, this is the kind of interaction you do in these marketplaces. Here are the Indigenous group marketplaces that could also benefit you and them. So from an agent-centric point of view, to me, that doesn't really sort of work so well, because it's all up to me to find out what those marketplaces are. So how can we, without breaking the whole agent-centric thing, how can we have a sort of like external third party to be able to facilitate those engagements? Without obviously breaking the whole kind of thing, the whole model. And sorry, just to go on my rant a little bit more. So imagine Holochain is actually really mature and out there in the world and doing all this stuff. It's going to get really complicated really quick for users to be able to know what is out there and how they can engage with it. So it's not just the sort of like what the current paradigm, which is, people that are, have issues with housing or drug dependence, they get help. We'll all probably need these services to help us navigate this new world. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, it's the how do you discover the marketplaces before you've even discovered, before you're even dealing with how do you discover the right listings.
Yeah, exactly. And in a fair and equitable way as well. So not someone having control over that knowledge, which is currently the way things work. Yeah.
Cool. Any more thoughts? we can close it for this week. I feel like, and maybe you can move into closing reflections, if any. I can start. I think for me, I'm just really looking, I'm very happy to jump into some of these questions that you raised. So yeah, Lynn and Posby, if you guys feel open to it, like I'd love to dive into it. And I promise no more derivatives talk. But yeah, that's looking forward to it. Nice. Any other closing reflections?
Yes, it was very nice talking. It was very nice talking to you guys. I appreciate listen to. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talk again.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
You too. Bye, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
See you later.
Thanks, Ed. Have a good one.
Bye.